I get to introduce somebody who has been really a big, huge partner for me getting to know the region the first 12 months. I call him the hardest working man in show business, Barry Broom, CEO of GSEC.
Thank you, James. Now we know why James is stumbling out of the block. He's listening to me. He's doing a great job. Well, it's a privilege to be here, and obviously I think it shows the strength of our region that we have everybody here to have a conversation about our future. As you know, we've been rising in many ways as a community, but there needs to be a deeper and more careful conversation about who's all rising together. And I think we know as a community, it's unacceptable for us to leave one set of our community members behind, whether that be by gender, by class, or by orientation. And so I have the privilege of introducing a real thought leader on the economy. You know, part of what we all have learned to do is it starts with evidence and data. And I think the most compelling economic minds in the country on assessing and understanding market data for metropolitan economies is the Brookings Institute. She and Bob Wiseman on how to think about these things when we work together in Phoenix is Amy Liu of the Brookings Institute. Amy is the Vice President at the Brookings Institute, and she's the Director of the Metropolitan Policy Program. She has founded that herself in 1996, and she spent 2 decades crossing the country helping communities to think about how they operate in a seamless way, not by government and government, but by community and community, asset by asset, and doing a better job at undertaking the mission of creating a successfully sustainable, inclusive economy. I know that you'll enjoy her comments, and she will be around for a question and answer after this. So without further ado, please welcome Amy Liu to the stage.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much, Barry. It's great to see you again. It's great to see you in the setting. You guys have an absolute energizer bunny in your town in Barry. Thank you, James, for having me be a guest here with you. I am really excited to be back in Sacramento. Some of you know I was here in the city last Thursday and Friday, so it's wonderful to be back today. So I am here thanks to the efforts of a group of regional players who care about the future of the Sacramento region. Now, led by Valley Vision, we have SACOG, GSEC, Sacramento Region, the Metro Chamber, and the Sacramento Region Business Association all working together. So they asked Brookings to bring some clarity and hopefully some focus to their effort. And I know you're eager to go beyond another report into some concrete action. Now, I've also been serving as an advisor to Mayor Darrell Steinberg, who's on his economic inclusion initiative for the city of Sacramento called Project Prosperous. So to me, it's really encouraging that the leaders in this room, all of you, have this shared sense of urgency to do something now and to do something bigger. And my hope is that these parallel aspirations become one aligned vision that advances the whole region as the city and the suburbs' fates are tied together. So today I'm going to talk about 4 things that are based on a new report that Brookings released today with our partners, and I think the executive summary is on your table and you can find the full report on the website. I'm going to talk about what is the definition of regional economic success. How does the greater Sacramento region fare on the key assets that drive economic prosperity? Why big shifts in the modern economy will demand new approaches, or complacency will leave this community and your residents further behind? And lastly, how can leaders like you advance inclusive economic growth in this digital age? So we have a lot to cover, so we're going to get right to it. So what defines regional economic success? Now, we at Brookings believe that the penultimate goal for every single city and metropolitan area is to achieve 3 goals of growth, prosperity, and inclusion. No doubt growth is fundamental. A region absolutely needs more jobs and more output to create opportunities for people. Wages are definitely more likely to rise and poverty to decline when there is demand for workers. Business dynamism, the ability to launch new firms, also is an indication of a region's growth potential, as new firms also result in more jobs and more job openings for people so they can see their earnings grow. But that growth ought to be more prosperous. There's no doubt a region can grow by adding lots of low-wage jobs, but that's not ideal. We want growth that comes from good-paying jobs and more productive firms and people for the broader population. And to achieve inclusion, higher standards of living must raise the employment and incomes of all segments of the community, closing disparities by race and by place. Now, we find that the Sacramento region benefits from the stability offered by the state government, yet there are cracks in the future growth trajectory. So what I'm going to do is, most of the report findings are based on the 6-county region represented by leaders in this room, including Sutter and Yuba counties. And there are some exceptions, such as the data I'm about to show, which is for the 4-county metro areas defined by the census. But here's what the data looks like for Sacramento. On growth, this metropolitan area has added jobs in the last 10 years since the recession, but that job growth lags the national average. On prosperity, the income created per job in the Sacramento MSA has essentially stayed flat, while it has improved by 6% nationally. Productivity is one proxy for job quality. And on inclusion, median wages for individual workers are lower today than they were 10 years ago, ranking this region 84th among the 100 largest metropolitan areas. The nation's overall wage stagnation is the reason why so many people believe that making the economy work for more people is the most pressing issue of our time. And in a state where the cost of housing continues to rise, this declining wage is the last thing families need. This chart shows that 35% of households in the Sacramento region, or more than 800,000 families, do not earn enough to cover the basic costs of housing, transportation, childcare, healthcare, and other basic necessities. There are many more struggling families today than prior to the recession. Now, Black and Hispanic households are more likely to be struggling, with 47% and 42% of such families earning below a living wage. Yet a portion of white and Asian households also struggle to make ends meet. Now, on the right, less educated earners are also more likely to suffer, particularly those that did not graduate from high school or do not have a college degree. So bottom line, the Sacramento region is underperforming the national average in key indicators of growth, prosperity, and inclusion, with wages eroding as household costs are going up. Now, does the region possess the assets that can reverse these trend lines? That's the most pressing question. Now, to start, in the report, we talk about the fact that there are 5 drivers of regional economic dynamics that together create growth, prosperity, and income in a region. At the core are traded sectors, skilled workers, and innovation that are highly interrelated. Traded clusters are distinct concentrations of industries or functions that produce goods and services sold to customers outside the region, bringing in income into the local economy and supporting the growth of local businesses. Talent, particularly one that matches the needs of local industries, drive innovation and quality growth. That innovation, particularly the ability to research, produce, and commercialize new products, new services, and even launch new enterprises, that kind of innovation is essential to keeping our traded sectors competitive and the economy dynamic. Enablers then make those core drivers better. Infrastructure is shorthand for the built environment. How the physical form links workers, firms, and suppliers together to boost productivity and efficiency. Governance is about the effectiveness of government and local institutions to solve market problems. So let's take a look at how the Sacramento region strengths are in each one of these dimensions. We'll start with traded sectors. First, the region lacks a strong base of industries that drive growth. So there's a lot to look at here, so let me tell you what matters. First, what you want are blue dots, which represent the traded sectors that drive income in the region. Second, you want those blue dots in the upper right-hand corner, which represents those industries that pay a good wage and are growing faster than the industry average. Unfortunately, there are no blue dots or traded sectors in the growth quadrant of the Sacramento region. The best paid jobs are not private sector ones, but government. While the state government is an important driver of opportunity in this region, there's ultimately a limit to how much government can grow, unlike private industry. Instead, where you do have good paying traded sector strengths, such as professional business services, finance, and manufacturing, these industries are losing their competitive edge, as seen in the upper left corner. Lower wage industries with the fastest growth in healthcare and transportation logistics. Now, on balance then, the Sacramento region is simply not generating sufficient jobs in traded sectors in this post-recession period, lacking the distinctiveness relative to peers like Orlando with its visitor economy, Columbus on its retail headquarters and new mobility tech, or Pittsburgh on robotics and AV. Now, on skilled workforce, the region is certainly blessed with a high share of skilled labor, third highest among all your peer metros as measured by the share of workers that are high school graduates. However, employers in the Sacramento region are demanding workers to have at least a college degree, paying them more by 4% or more in earnings than those with a high school diploma or a 2-year degree. Now, this is certainly not a knock on the value of associate's degrees, but it could mean that this region's institutions are not generating the right kind of credentials needed by the firms in your growing or traded sectors. Now, if a college education matters to firms here and in Northern California, then we don't have educational equity, as Blacks and Hispanics in the Sacramento region are less likely to hold a college degree at 18% compared to 37% for. Now, on innovation, the Sacramento region has high rates of university R&D investment compared to peers, led primarily by UC Davis, thanks to their strengths in health, bio, and agriculture sciences. Cal State also tracks $15 million in research funding per year. However, despite high patenting rates by some now, on infrastructure and the built environment, the region is growing, I think, in such a way that may be undermining the urban period. The four-county metropolitan area lost jobs in the counties, as highlighted in the red and the pink, at a time when knowledge workers and knowledge industries prize density and prize urbanization. Now, one result of this decentralized job pattern is that all neighborhoods in the metropolitan area, on average, lost access to 6.6% of the area's jobs that were accessible within a typical commute time. And this was most acute for majority-minority neighborhoods where nearby jobs declined by 14.3%. Now, given the demand for proximity and quality places in the modern economy, it's important for every single metropolitan area to have a series of dense, high-quality job hubs connected by good roads and transit so that workers can access jobs no matter where they live in the region. Now, these bars, which are based on work by SACOG, shows that the top 5 job centers in the region in terms of job volume, that nearly all are impossible to get to by transit, which are the bars represented in green. And most residents can access most of these job centers by car, which is good news, within a 30-minute commute, save for the UC Davis campus. Now, in addition to being accessible to workers, these job centers should also be home to jobs in growing industries that pay good wages and are surrounded by walkable, mixed-use, mixed-income developments, much like the place where we are here, with restaurants, shops, and other amenities, which can add to industry and neighborhood growth, and hopefully also contribute to income growth as well. Now, in governance, the Sacramento region has many units of local governments and special districts per 100,000 residents, which puts you on par with your Midwest and Rust Belt peers. And according to a recent study by OECD of their member nations, the metropolitan economies that have higher levels of government fragmentation also have less productivity because of the inability to be nimble in action and policies amid rapid change, which is why it's so important that you all are here together to work together on these challenges. So in short, from this market assessment, this region does have important assets, like a relatively educated workforce, strong research universities, yet the Sacramento region overall, I think, has a foundation that lacks the industry diversity, the dynamism, the talent, the efficient land use that will put the region on a path to long-run growth and opportunity. Now, let me add one other further note of urgency. Any efforts to grow the economy must be rooted in where the economy is heading, not where it has been. And the economy is profoundly changing. It's most notable in the way we work, sharing files via Dropbox and Salesforce, the way we travel via Uber and Lyft, and the way we communicate and shop from our handheld devices and through social media accounts. Indeed, the modern economy will be, yes, it will be more global, more urban, and it will be more racially and ethnically diverse. We can choose as assets to make our communities more productive and opportunity rich, or we can resist, or let these forces simply happen to us, which will likely result in less growth, wider inequality, and greater social distrust in our community and in our politics. In fact, our nation actually is at a crossroads right now, because both scenarios are quite possible. Now, my hope is that leaders like you would choose the affirmative path, that we need global competitiveness, innovation, and shared prosperity. Now, here are a few points on why standing still is no longer an option if you want a more prosperous future. Most notably, the modern economy is being transformed by the rapid diffusion of digital technologies, whether it's robotics, cloud computing, mobile apps, big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And robotics has already eliminated a lot of jobs in the manufacturing sector, even though it's made the industry much more productive. We already heard about this phenomenon from our earlier speaker. This chart shows one dimension of how tech is transforming the services industry, which employs the vast majority of Americans. E-commerce is simply right-sizing retail right now. 6,400 stores closed in 2017 alone. And this slide shows that shakeout. Forget about who wins Amazon at HQ2. Every community is going to be impacted by Amazon's ambitions to dominate the future of how we shop. Since 2010, the retail sector has shed approximately 300,000 traditional sales jobs, while warehousing, customer service, supply chain management jobs have emerged in their place. This churn will impact cities and suburbs depending on sales tax revenue. It will create uncertainty for main streets and neighborhood commercial corridors unless you adapt like this community. And it could potentially shift jobs to less accessible locations for low-skilled workers. Now, on the positive side, the tech adoption is essential. It is an essential ingredient for maintaining or promoting productivity in terms of the amount of income a firm or industry could generate from these new investments. In a recent Brookings report, we found that the industries that had the most digital adoption or digital content, like information and communications, technology, or management of firms, these were more likely to experience productivity gains in the recent years, more so than lower tech industries like warehouse distribution and agriculture. So can this region use its R&D and industry expertise in ag, for instance, to modernize the food and ag sector in such a way that, because there's so much demand for agricultural products globally? Now, the rise of the digital economy also means we need to have a different workforce to keep pace with the needs of employers. Now, our scholar, Mark Miro, examined the digital skills requirements of over 500 different occupations representing 91% of the labor market. He gave a digital skill score for every occupation based on 2 criteria. Does the worker today need specific knowledge of computers and electronics to do his or her job? And does the job require frequent use of the computer in his or her daily tasks? And what he found is for this region in 2002, pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter, pre-iPhone, more than half, or 43% of jobs in the Sacramento area did not require workers to have many computer skills, and just 6% required high levels of computer literacy. You guys already flipped to the chart ahead of you? Yep. 14 years later, skills requirements have shifted dramatically. Jobs with low digital skills have shrunk to just 28%, or 1/4 of all jobs, while the demand for mid-tech workers have expanded to 48%, and the demand for high-tech workers in Sacramento have quadrupled. The responsibilities on numerous jobs now have essentially digitalized, from software designers, yes, but to also critical pathway jobs for people in the middle, such as administrative assistants, tool and die makers, police officers, distribution managers, and workers in these high-tech, mid-tech positions are paid more as a result of these greater skills than low-tech occupations. While all that is happening, the people we must prepare for the modern economy is aging and diversifying, and this chart shows one dimension of that. The racial composition of millennials, the young professionals aged 18 to 34 that every community wants to attract and retain. As my colleague Bill Fry describes it, the millennials are, yes, they are the largest generation in the country, and they are the bridge generation. And what is a majority white, older population, and the coming majority minority population behind them. And as you can see here, millennials today in the nation are 44% young adults of color, with Hispanics making up a larger share than blacks. In the Sacramento area, however, your millennials are already majority adults of color, with 41% being African American and Hispanic. This means this region is diversifying faster than many of your peer regions you're trying to compete with, and it also places even greater premium on your education and workforce training systems to help this talent pool get the skills, the experience, the networks they need to succeed in your modern economy. Yet, as our workers diversify and our jobs digitalize, we find that workers of color are not benefiting from our digital transformation. Overall, workers of color represent 37% of workers today, as you can see from these green bars. But Black and Hispanic workers are more likely to work in low-tech, lower-paying occupations like food prep, service, hospitality, home health care aides, and they are less likely to work in higher-paying digital occupations like computer programmers and architects and engineers. And finally, the rise of digitalization and urbanization are impacting the distribution of opportunity between places. In the last few years, 60% of all digital job growth took place in just 10 metropolitan areas. This chart is not about tech job growth, but which metros are increasing their share of the total market of US tech jobs. And what this shows is, yes, those superstar cities like San Francisco, San Jose, Austin, and Boston continue to grab greater market share of US tech growth between 2010 and 2015, despite how expensive their housing market might be and is. And despite Sacramento's proximity to the Bay Area, this region is essentially not losing or gaining ground on tech jobs than before. And meanwhile, your peer metros like Nashville, Phoenix, Indianapolis are breaking into this club and increasing their competitive edge in tech. Now, if there is one lesson we can take from this most noteworthy economic development deal of the century, it is this. Amazon, through its RFQ for its second headquarters, essentially powerfully signaled what cities need if they want to be a leader in the modern economy. They said, cities need a strong technical workforce, including the ability to produce such talent via good computer science programming in its K-12 system, strong technical certificates in its community colleges, and relevant engineering degrees in its higher ed systems. Cities also need to have great urban sustainable places offering multimodal transportation options like bike lanes, transit, walking, with green space, public gathering places, and eco-friendly design, energy efficient buildings. Cities need globally connected infrastructure with highways and international airports that connect companies to customers and talent across the US and around the world. And cities must exhibit a culture of diversity and inclusion, with this value being good for business. In short, their modern economy will be technological, it will be global, it will be urban, it will be diverse. That's what this RFP reinforced. It also reinforced the drivers of the economy that I just summarized earlier. So, big takeaway for you all, the economy is fast moving, and the issue ahead is, will you embrace all of these assets of the future economy, or will you stand still and potentially risk putting the whole community, your workers, your industries, further behind? So how can leaders like you make the shift then to a more robust growth and opportunity in this digital age? So what I'll tell you is what not to do. Do not pursue traditional economic growth strategies where you throw large subsidies at firms to locate in your region. It is wasteful, it is inefficient, it doesn't address the foundational issues we just discussed. And it's also the wrong message from the RFP slide that I just showed, and I'll come back to that. Business attraction now is not the same as it used to be. It has now become a high-risk subsidy game that seems to know no ceiling, making it even harder and harder to justify the benefits for local residents and taxpayers. Over $1 billion for Tesla in Nevada, $3 billion in climbing for Foxconn in Wisconsin, and potentially $7 billion for Amazon's second headquarters. Dollars that could be used to support the critical public goods that help our communities adapt to the modern era, like bolstering K-12 education, helping employers invest in training, building digital infrastructure. And these high visibility deals are a distraction from how economic growth comes about, which is by investing in the local ecosystem that supports existing businesses and existing workers. The Amazon chase is not about the chase. It is about rewarding the regions that actually have been improving the fundamental drivers of economic growth over time, and now they are prime for that high-tech investment. And this study just reinforces that. It shows that the origins of job growth in most states, 86% of it comes from startups and the expansion of existing businesses, not attracting firms from the outside. In other words, if you create an environment where your local businesses and your local workers can thrive and they want to be in this market, then outside firms will want to locate here, be part of the action. So make a community that works for your existing businesses and your existing workers. So as a first step, leaders need to agree to a broader vision of economic development, a different growth framework, not just more jobs at any price, but one that puts a regional economy on a trajectory of higher growth, increasing the productivity of your existing firms and workers, that improves the incomes and the quality of life of everyone in the region, no matter where they live. At its best, economic development is inherently inclusive. That is because all of our collective efforts ought to be increasing the economic participation of more workers, of more firms, of more industries in economic success to sustain our growth. Now, to achieve this broader vision of growth and inclusion requires unprecedented collaboration across these actors. As elected officials, you have the power to convene and compel all of these different actors to work more tightly together. And in a region that is dominated by a lot of government jobs, there is greater urgency to ensure that the private sector, CEOs of large firms and small firms, are personally engaged. And I don't mean just coming to meetings, but having business executives see the market opportunities by working together, and they themselves become visible champions for driving change. Now, the strategies that define this new approach, which we talk about in our report, requires helping our firms, our people, our places adapt to this new reality so they can be resilient in these changing times. That means to help firms, we need to help spur business dynamism in ways that help small, mid-sized companies, especially in your priority industries, survive and expand through periods of disruption. To help people, our strategies need to equip our young and older workers alike for the skills and demands in this fast-changing economy. And these are some of those ideas there. How we urbanize and develop place obviously matters to economic growth and opportunity. And this means, yes, more transportation choices, but also not just focusing on downtown revitalization, but a series of high-quality job hubs around the region. So let me just close with just a few stories of how some regions are coming together on these dimensions. So I wanted to talk about St. Louis, because St. Louis is not the place you would think of as a model, but in fact this region has made some big bets to invest in one set of adjacent industries, agriculture, tech, and bioscience, which is now paid off, making St. Louis a strong innovation hub, much like Pittsburgh has now become the center of robotics. In short, back in 1998, in response to interest from a big ag company called Monsanto, the Chancellor of Washington University created what became the Danforth Center, one of the top plant science research centers in the country. 4 years later, St. Louis and other leaders created BioGenerator, an organization dedicated to commercializing all of that excellent research into firm startups and into patented products. Today, BioGenerator has 30 firms in its portfolio, all of which are attracting venture capital from outside of St. Louis. BioGenerator decided that it needed space. They created the Cortex Innovation Center, which sits on which is now home to training facilities, gathering space, and soon will be connected with a light rail stop. Cortex today, thanks to all those efforts, is home to 250 companies, with 40% of those jobs held by workers with high school and 2-year degrees only, part of its commitment to inclusion. That entrepreneurial spirit that has emerged over time in St. Louis led to Jim McKelvey to found Square, a business services company that you all are aware of. McKelvey had a hard time finding enough workers for its company, so he created a nonprofit called Launch Code in 2013, which is today providing paid apprenticeships and training for students of color and women for all kinds of software applications for local firms. In short, in just a series of deliberate moves in innovation, in skills development, in placemaking, in one industry, St. Louis has now transformed itself, home to 400 growing ag tech companies, 1,400 jobs from tech startups at a time when business dynamism is down in the country. And I just wanted to show that, given all the jurisdictions here, Milwaukee is a great example how 7 counties came together with the central city around a comprehensive economic development play and a skills strategy. And in particular, in this case, the 7 counties came together with their high schools, with their public school districts, to help 200,000 high school students access career-based learning opportunities through internships and apprenticeships, so that young people get excited about the careers they can have in the home region. On creating high-quality connected places, I wanted to point to the work in Northeast Ohio, what they call job hubs. This is innovative work where they are aligning investments in community development, economic development, and transportation planning, so that with quality walkable places, again, so that people can access high-quality traded sector jobs throughout the region. So let me close with this. This is a quote from a civic leader and a journalist from Kansas City, which has been part of a regional initiative called K-State Rising. And he said, communities are not going to accidentally win in the 21st century. Instead, they must be intentional in how they position themselves for growth and prosperity in the long run. So, it is up to you. It is up to you to make sure that our report on the Sacramento regional economy is not the end, but a beginning of some very exciting, focused, purposeful efforts to strengthen this region's community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation, Amy Liu. To moderate to the stage, Bill Mueller, Chief Executive.
Oh, you're back there. I get to sit on the stool by myself.
You do? Okay, Ken. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good. All right. Well, I'm roving to be able to field your questions for Amy. So be thinking of your questions, but first off, good morning. Wasn't Amy amazing? Let's give her a round of applause. So Monica tells me that we have about 15 minutes for questions. So what I'd like to do is rove around the room and ask you to basically give me your name and your title, and then we'll direct this, and hopefully we'll have a really good exchange. So who'd like to go first? Any questions? Yep.
John Knight with Los Rios Community College District. Brookings report, did you take in consideration the regulatory environment in California and the tax structure in California?
We did not, but that is actually a very important factor in the government's bucket of the drivers, is whether or not our policies are nimble enough to reflect the changes in the economy. So I would, you all know the regulatory framework better than I do. That said, what stuns me still is, despite the high cost of the regulatory environment, is the Bay Area continues to capture more and more of those knowledge workers and jobs, and would be stemming growth.
Okay. I'm sure we have other questions. Cassandra? All right.
Good morning, Cassandra Jennings from the Greater Sacramento Urban League. Good to see you again. You mentioned that our region is diversifying faster than others. Can you tell us what examples you think we need to really address the issues of African Americans and Latinos in particular being a part of the growing economy?
Well, this is a continuation of the great conversation we had in the mayor's offices last week. That's big. So what I would say is a couple things. One is engagement needs to be genuine. Black Latino organizations and leaders need to be at the table shaping the future of this conversation. In many places I've been to, there's a sense that we end up with status quo strategies, because it's the same old people sitting around the table coming up with ideas. So we want a set of solutions that reflect our future community and our future workforce. We need to have people at the table shaping those decisions with us. That's one. Second is, we know that Latinos and African Americans have a different history and pathway, and we need to create programs that allow them to create better social networks. We need private sector engagement in a way that allows our young people to access not just low-wage jobs, but really high-quality work experience and expand their professional networks in ways that opens up much, much more opportunities. Again, what I worry oftentimes is the conversation about equity and inclusion is often driven by government and nonprofit. and not with and social justice groups and community development groups, and yet the economic development and the poorer communities are not at the table sharing in that ambition. So again, we can get to economic inclusion if the economy players and the equity players are jointly creating those opportunities that can create upward mobility. So that's a start. By the way, I think I mentioned this to you too, but I was at an event in Indianapolis last week where the Chamber of Commerce announced how they were partnering differently in the community. They're using their economic development incentives to reward firms that hire ex-offenders. They also, as an economic development organization, are partnering with the Department of Corrections to provide entrepreneurship training for folks who are re-entering the labor market so that they can create companies when they come out, and they've already invested 5 loans for startups coming out of for those who are re-entering the labor market. So those are the kind of unusual alliances that we can create to break the pattern.
Yes, good morning. Nathan Dietrich from Sacramento State. You mentioned in your previous answer and your chart was very telling how lagging Sacramento region was on technology jobs, and we're so close to the Bay Area. Did you or your colleagues look into specifically what we're lacking in and what the key reasons that we don't have those technology jobs, like going further into the data?
So in the report, we have broken down those broad sector categories into more refined areas where you do have sector strengths. You do have these jobs here. I think that's the issue. You do have these jobs here, but they are probably not well known, and they, at least in the times that I've been here in Sacramento, they've not been at the table of talking about what they need to thrive here. And so one of the conversations I've had, our team has had with Barry, Valley Vision, and others is we now need to take the Brookings report, which is essentially a sense of urgency, and go deeper and into the data, but also interviewing companies in certain areas to better understand who's in this sector. You know, in Milwaukee, people said, I don't think we have a water cluster. And then a bunch of students actually got assigned the project to understand what firms are actually in the water cluster, and they found 200 firms that do something related to water, and they now have a burgeoning water tech. Because every place around the globe facing drought and other things want water energy efficiency, water power, water solutions, irrigation, all that. So this goes back to just being intentional and talking to companies, but they exist here. And once you understand where they want to go, what skills they need, what investments they need, the strategies will become more self-evident. But right now, the environment isn't allowing that growth to occur.
Jason Johnson, City of Rockland. I think you partially answered the question that I had, because I was looking at how are we going to separate ourselves from San Francisco? Because in essence, we're competing with them for a lot of these jobs within those sectors, and they're 2-hour commute. So you look at the commutes that you showed up there, half hour, 45 minutes in some areas or more. That's not that much of a difference, to commute that, and the pay is a lot higher in that area. So is that being addressed in this report, or is that part of the next step then?
I think that is, what's really interesting, I'd be curious if to answer what James thinks of this. One of the things that we found in the report is that this region's commute patterns by driving is lower than a lot of peers. And I wondered if that was because a lot of people actually get on the train and go to the Bay Area. I don't know, but there's less driving here than in other markets. So there's a lot of telecommuting too. But what I would say is, do you want to tie yourself to the Bay Area, which means that you would then need a set of companies here that complement the sectors in the Bay Area? That you have software developers, or that you have something here that complements, and so that people want to then increase the commuting between these two regions. Or you set yourselves apart because you're not the Bay Area. You have different industry strengths, whether it's in ag or food or sort of defense related or auto. So I think this is the question that the community needs to come to as part of that. I hope it helps.
David?
Hi, Miguel Yukovich with the town of Loomis. While we have a very low unemployment rate in Placer County, 4.3, the number of jobs that are coming in are basically low-paying jobs. And maybe answer this question like the Amazon Fulfillment Center I read, where 20% of those people are poverty level, the Walmarts, the restaurants, things of that nature. I was just wondering, and I guess you put out the challenge that we as local leaders need to go out in our community and engage those businesses that are out there that pay the better wages and see how we can get them to expand. Is that the secret of what we need to do?
Yes, well said. and by the way, I've been in a lot of meetings where people talked about the Amazon fulfillment centers and they actually throw subsidies at the fulfillment centers, which I think is troubling because the data is showing that every time those fulfillment centers come into a region, it's actually lowering the average wage in the community. But the other is that I have a separate slide that I didn't put up today, is that warehouse distribution fulfillment center jobs are more likely to get automated today than truck driving. So there's already a lot of automation in those warehouses, and so the question is, it might create short-term jobs, but not maybe long-term pathways.
Amy, hi, Christopher Walden. I'm over here.
You're sitting.
I'm sitting down. I'm the mayor of West Sacramento, and the St. Louis example was you described it, I think, quite accurately as a series of sequence of intentional moves.
Yes.
Largely led by not government, but by not the city government. I remember asking the mayor about it. He basically said it had nothing to do with it. We have a tendency to want to chart out all the sequence of moves as a government, civic collaborative in advance, and then wait for them all to happen. And you described one of our challenges with UC Davis, great production of research, and we are horrible at conversion into jobs, into startups. Could you just dig in a little bit more into that, the mechanics of how we might do better at the creation of wealth and opportunity, prosperity, and inclusion from that asset of research and development that's already occurring?
So we have a paper coming, because we do lots of papers, but we have a paper coming out on what does it mean to scale up clusters. Everyone's asking us, you talk about growing from within, you talk about focusing on your existing industries and strengths. What does that look like in a region? What interventions, what players, what results come from that? So we have a draft right now with some case studies that explain that. And whether it's St. Louis or Pittsburgh or Milwaukee or upstate New York, Barry can talk about his Phoenix experience, but there are some common elements of the places that have found a way to diversify into some high growth areas. One is they don't make up the sector out of whole cloth. It's actually hidden inside your economy. So if for some reason Sprint goes away in Kansas City, I'm saying that to my colleagues here from Mark, is the company may go away, but the talent, the people who understand telecommunications and software development and business services are still in the community. So how do you tap that into an entrepreneurship center, a place where they can create new products and services, connect those workers to other demand in the community? So you have indigenous strengths. So St. Louis came out of their ag. In central New York, the Milwaukee water cluster came out of the fact that they used to make beer, right? And sit next to a major lake. So people are looking around for the next high-tech thing, and actually first it begins with understanding what your companies already know and what your base already knows. So that's one. Second is absolutely industry-led, but government, and even funded. And universities are often co-designing with industry. What I don't know is where's industry? Do they demand the research coming out of the universities? Do they, like in Monsanto, they said, I really like what's coming out of Washington, I'm gonna pay for that. When GE Appliance Park invested in a commuter school called University of Louisville, it was because they had a rapid prototyping center that they needed. And that investment and co-investment with GE has now led to an entrepreneurship effort and a training effort tied around advanced appliances and new technologies there. So I would, again, it goes back to, you have the power to identify or know the companies or the small emergent entrepreneurs in your jurisdiction. How do you do that in a way with your colleagues here where they begin to have a conversation about what their shared aspirations are? Sometimes by just networking companies, they didn't realize that that capability existed in the community. So if I was going after a deal and a contract in China and I needed a subcontractor with me, I didn't know that firm was here. So we can collectively create the solution for a major OEM somewhere else. That networking, that convening power you all have is what creates the synergies to come up with some of these solutions.
Jason Banks, City of Live Oak. Question I have for you, the numbers are very compelling, and I think obviously the time for us as a region to take action was about 5 minutes ago. So my question to you is, those of us in government become far too comfortable with how slow things move. And clearly some of our colleagues around the country have not accepted status quo. We obviously have some infrastructure improvements that are necessary to accomplish some of these goals, increase in broadband, all of those types of things. Could you set for us some realistic time estimates of how we could accomplish some of these so that we're not thinking decades, rather we're thinking, months and years?
I have two ways of answering that. One is that short-termism is what is the detriment of the big play. And in fact, if you listen to the case study in Milwaukee, when they decided to do the water cluster, which now has a water tech center, a new freshwater life sciences institute, and hundreds of companies on the waterfront and in some redevelopment areas. It all started because two CEOs, one who did water faucets, the other did water infiltration. One said, hey, we kind of do something similar. I didn't know you were here. This economy is struggling. Maybe there is something around our expertise and capability. They went to the university, and then this collaboration emerged. When the nonprofit came to organize the cluster, the elected officials, not a knock on you, basically said, show me the jobs. Show me that this collaboration is going to generate jobs right away. And they said, no way. If this is about short-term delivery, we will not get there. We need to solve the industry problem. We need to build the capability that solves this for the globe. We need the workforce and the scientists to support this. This doesn't mean you don't do any other sector strategies, but it does mean you're going to make a bet that is going to transform or reposition the economy. Not from a series of small investments, but some big strategic investments. And so what I would say is, it doesn't mean that small investments that you all do are important contributors. But this is the one table where you all need to decide on the one or two things you do together. And it could be, like I said with St. Louis, is the sector, and then you saw it, I gave a story yesterday about Milwaukee. Each one of the sector strategies has a placemaking element to it, has a skills development element to it, has a university R&D commercialization element, and has venture capital and entrepreneurship. It is multifaceted, but around making a choice about what is distinctive about this region, that people then want to be here, not just because it's a state government, but because there is some vibrant specializations here that makes me want to open a business here. And so I know this is hard, but that is the conversation you all have the opportunity to do. Otherwise, we end up where I know in past reports, it becomes everything and no priorities.
So Amy, I think, why don't we sum up this last point? So we've got to make choices. So how do we do that? How do we make choices when we have a room full of elected officials? There are business leaders that are here, others outside the room. How do you sort of advise us to create that one or two or three sort of focused activities?
So, I think that the analysis that we did, both in the chart, but if you look inside the report, it gives a hint to where you have hidden strengths. There is IT here. There is manufacturing, although it's starting, it's slipping, right? There is some business services that may be supporting the government, but those business services, whether it's web or accounting or other things, are also being used for other things. So you have it here. So I would use that as a start to go deeper. The second is, I think you need to do a bunch of employer interviews to find out where the market opportunity is. And I would tell you that when our staff interviewed 30 companies as part of this project, they were not accompanied by any staff. No knock to our sponsors. But those relationships should not be Brookings relationships. You all should own that knowledge. You all should know what your companies are thinking about day in and day out. Do not farm it out to other people. Because the other thing, oh my gosh, do not give this to consultants. No. And these business relationships here. And they then get excited about working with government because government now understands them and begins to respond, large and small. So I think that you all need to trust by convening and interviewing that light bulbs will come off. I'll just tell you one other story. When we were in Syracuse, this was with Bob Weisbord, we were in central New York. Syracuse has Syracuse University. It is a struggling older industrial city. It has lost so much industry that when we did our traditional market analysis of the sectors, every single sector had less than a 1.0 LQ. 1.0 LQ, which means they were losing specializations, everything, and there were not enough firms in each of the clusters to pick a cluster. And yet, the university had come down and made investments in downtown. They had made investments in neighborhoods, and they had to say yes to education. They were doing all this other stuff, but there was not a single source of income growth or source of economic, dynamism in the community, even though they did everything else. So we pushed them hard. What is going to be the source of economic growth in central New York? And the data was like, there's nothing here. So they decided, we're just going to convene 20 of the most engaged mid-sized companies in the region and just have a conversation with them. And all of a sudden, a light bulb went off in that room that none of the organizers would have ever thought of, which is, even though you used to work for Carrier and you used to be a defense contractor and you used to be an auto supplier, completely different sectors, they all had one common capability, which is they were collecting big data and remote sensing to do, smart appliances, drone, and all of a sudden they said, maybe we should pool all this capability together in a way that helps us all. And now Central New York is the center for drone technologies with a massive, to the point where Bosch relocated its headquarters to be in the center of Central New York's capabilities. All happened by accident, by bringing people together. So that's what you guys can do.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Please join me in thanking Amy Liu. Okay, well, this is the point of the program where we hope that you brought your smartphone and that you're going to be able to weigh in using that smartphone and actually vote. So if you look at the screen, hopefully you will have